Hello, good evening. If you are here for the final instalment of mine and the very wonderful Lindsay Fraser's 4-part series, you're in the right place. We've had some technical difficulties and we were over on Lindsay's channel and that wasn't working, so we're trying on my channel. Lindsay is here now. Let's bring her in. And she today's conversation, which is going to be based all around the luteal phase. I believe here she is. Here we are. Hi, Lindsay.
Hi. It finally worked. I am not sure what's going on, but hey, we figured out a solution. That's all that matters, right?
Amen. Yes. Always fun and games on these technological issues. But we're here, so that's great. So Lindsay, why don't you go ahead and introduce this series as we're usually on your page, and yeah, I'm going to hand over to you.
Hi, welcome everybody. Today is the 4th in our series on the menstrual cycle, and today we're going to talk about the luteal phase. Now, if you missed the menstrual and the follicular, I can't even talk today, and the ovulation phase, go back. Those videos are there from the previous weeks. You can also DM either Evie or myself, and we're happily give you a little link to that so you can join us. I was a little sad today is the last of our little series, but I'm also excited because I think we spend the most time in this one in particular, and I think it'll be good to talk a little bit about what happens during that. But I suppose just to give a recap of sort of who we are quickly, because I know this may be your first time joining us, and for some of you, you've been here before, but I will just start and then I'll have Evie introduce herself. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as a certified sex therapist, an IA accredited professional out of Minneapolis, where I specialize in relationships and sexuality, utilizing the Enneagram and your cell phase is about.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a certified Enneagram coach, and I specialize in working alongside people trying to debunk and demystify their menstrual cycle. I believe there's lots for us to learn in both understanding our Enneagram type and how our menstrual cycle works. And that's where my work is kind of centered at the moment. So I work with people online and in person, if you're far away and wondering how I do that. And I'm based in the UK, which you might be able to guess from my accent, perhaps. I am an Enneagram type 1, wing 2, and I'm a sexual, self-preference, social blind. It's my stacking. So yes, I'm really excited about today though. You're absolutely right, Lindsay. We do spend kind of the longest part of our cycle here in the luteal phase, which is where I am right now. So if you were to go back and watch the follicular phase video, for example, I'm actually in my follicular phase then, I think. So I might look and feel a little bit different. And so hopefully that can be a little bit helpful today. If you think, gosh, Eve maybe feels a little bit gentler, or she's not full of us. 23. And Lizzie, what cycle day are you on? Sorry.
Today I am in the ovulation. I think I'm in ovulation or follicular phase. Now I'm trying to think of what day I think it is for me. I think today's like day 4 or 5 or some. Well, it would be day 7 because last time I got my menstrual cycle early, so I know exactly what day it is. So yes, that is where and I realized I forgot to mention my Enneagram type. I am a 9, dominant social with the sexual instinct in the last position.
Amazing. Cool. And of course, me and Lindsay are talking from a very body-centered experience, both being a 9 and a 1, but we do cover the full spectrum of the Enneagram. So if you're a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7, don't switch off yet, because we will get to you. But yeah, let's talk about what the luteal phase looks like. So post-ovulation and pre-period, we kind of have this 2-week abyss, and it kind of feels like we've fallen off the face of the earth sometimes, and this is what we call our luteal autumn. So we can kind of think of this season that we're in right now, depending on where we're living, where the leaves are starting to turn brown. I'm looking at a tree outside of my window right now. It's getting dark earlier, it's a little bit chillier. This is what we're talking about when we're discussing the luteal phase. So we are beginning to slow down and, you know, work towards hibernation for our winter, or our bleed, our period. And so during this time, we can start to notice things like having less energy, feeling a bit spaced out. Our baseline level of our stress hormone is raised and our serotonin levels are lower. So we can feel a little bit more authentic, or sometimes we can even feel low in this phase. And I think that's really important to understand, that it's maybe not a specific mental health issue. Maybe nothing has changed or gone wrong. It's just a chemical change in the body that we need to be aware of. So we're feeling a bit spacey. We're looking to get things done and finished. We're looking for that sense of completion before our bleed. And that's because progesterone is rising in our body, which is also the dominant hormone during pregnancy. So that feeling of nesting is very we also might feel hungrier, and that's because our metabolism is working harder and faster. And so I actually read a doctor posted something really helpful about this recently. I'll try and link to it on my story after this, talking about how we need probably about 300 to 400 extra calories a day during the luteal phase. And so sometimes there is this confusion as to why all of a sudden we're ravenous when we're eating exactly the same as we were a week ago during ovulation. And that can be a little bit maddening sometimes, especially in a female body that has maybe grown up in a society that has lots to say about what we eat or shouldn't eat, or how much we should eat. And so I think it's really, really important to note that during this phase, you are going to be hungrier. We do need to eat more food, and as much as possible, how can we relax into that and realize that is a basic need during this time? Does that track for you at all, Lindsay?
That definitely tracks, and I think it's really important, sort of what you're saying too, in the sense of like your body needs more fuel, right? And I think that you're correct in sort of the pressure, I think, whether we like it or not, that women still get about like how much you should eat and what your body should look like and what that means. And I think it's just that ability to say, like, you know, I'm always someone that just eats when I am hungry. I've always been that kind of a person. I'm also the person of like, I better, like, I know that like when I don't eat what I need to, like I can be really crabby. And so and our bodies need more fuel for the things that they're doing right now. But yes, I personally do get more hungry during that period of time as well.
Yeah, totally. Well, great, this is making sense. So as I mentioned, I am cycle day 23. So I'm just checking my notes as we go through. I think, yes, sorry, just this one other moment I wanted to discuss, sorry, is that this element of focus usually feels like an access point during this time. And that sometimes doesn't quite make sense. Well, Evie, you just told me I feel tired and hungry and hangry, and you know, maybe I'm going to feel a little bit lower. Why would I feel this need to kind of complete and have such like fine-tuned focus lasers coming out of my eyeballs? Well, it's because this phase is really preparing the body for the bleed. And so as much as possible, the body is looking to get things done and completed. And so the way that the body will do that is by sending more energy to the part of the brain that allows us to stay focused on tasks in order to complete them. And so I always say, don't put too much pressure on this time, especially the second half of the luteal phase. It's about 2 weeks long. So really in the last 4 or 5 days leading up to that period, how can we release pressure? But also, if there are things that need to be completed or would be ideal to get finished off before you go into the period cave, use that focus. Be aware in your arsenal. That's something that you can lean into and make use of. I think is really key for this phase as well. Great. Okay. We also, during this time, are talking when we are maybe wanting to lay off the caffeine and the alcohol as much as possible. So we want to stay away from stimulants as much as possible. I have a second Instagram page called Your Moon Kitchen, where I work with a nutritional therapist and we talk about all the different things we can do in each of the phases to really support our bodies from a nutritional point of view, what we're putting in and fueling our body, as you said so well, Lindsay. But something that I really like to do is abstain completely from caffeine and alcohol. And that's because both of these stimulants can cause cramping. Now, if cramping isn't a big issue for you, you maybe don't need to worry so much. But if cramping is part of your period story at the moment, then potentially not having that morning coffee and staying away from that glass of wine in the evening is going to be really beneficial for you as you move through luteal and into your bleed. When we're taking something away, rather than drinking coffee in the morning, I drink ceremonial grade cacao. I will tag the cacao that I love to drink after this. But cacao is a really ancient and beautiful drink that was used thousands of years ago to really support the female body during this phase of the cycle. So not only is it going to help you feel more awake in the morning, but it also releases kind of tension in the uterus and along the uterine lining, which is where we would feel that cramping during our bleed. And sometimes, you know, we do get that premenstrual cramping as well, which is something to be aware of. And then instead of a glass of wine in the evening, I love to make an adrenal cocktail, or mocktail, should I say. And so this is essentially a very hydrating drink that is supportive to our body, that I drink out of a fancy glass because that makes me feel fancy and like I'm not missing out. And so again, lots of recipes for adrenal mocktails on my second account, which I will link in the chat after this. But essentially it's using things like coconut water and vitamin C and a little bit of sparkling water and some kind of berry into our menstrual phase. We want to, as much as possible, be upping our hydration levels. That was a bit of a monologue. I just ran off there. Sorry, Lindsay. Have you ever had an adrenal mocktail, Lindsay, or a cacao?
I have had cacao, but I have not had an adrenal cocktail. And I think it's really interesting. This was new information for me. I've always heard that you shouldn't during like your menstrual phase, but I didn't realize that also applied to sort of that before. And so I am very much an avid like cup of coffee drinker every single morning. And so I do have mushroom coffee too, and I've been kind of switching between the two. But like I like the idea of sort of that cacao as something, because I would miss my cup of coffee. So sure. I know I messaged you and I was like, well, what would be the alternative? I'm not supposed to be drinking coffee. And for me, alcohol ends up, you know, the glass of wine is more of the occasional sort of on the weekend type thing at this point in my life. But also good to note that can also influence or affect that. I think it's really interesting just how food or the things that we put into our body. I say you should definitely tag your other Instagram page as well, because I imagine a lot of people would be very interested.
Yeah. Well, we just haven't been taught, and I think there's such a disconnection between, you know, the information that we're taught either in school or you know, just as socially, what information is available to us growing up and then into our 20s and 30s versus what our body really needs. And so that's where we're seeing this, you know, huge disembodiment. You then throw in hormonal birth control into that, and gosh, it's, you know, there's a lot of work to do to bring us back together. And that's why I love focusing on nutrition and mindset, because there's actually so many bridges we can build, and quite quickly, by just listening to our body and then responding in a helpful and informed way. You know, drinking, you know, the cacao, which is going to help you feel more awake in the morning, but isn't going to add on any extra cramping. Or drinking the adrenal mocktail and feeling more hydrated, which in turn is going to allow for yeah, a better luteal phase and menstrual phase, rather than the glass of wine, or, you know, anything else. That's just my pick. Yeah, okay, cool. Well, let's look at the role of the Enneagram in the luteal phase. Now, just from my work, I think it's the easiest place to end up, you know, in your stress number, or the low side of your dominant type. Now, that isn't a death sentence. That is not what will happen. I just think with the cacophony of everything that's going on, plus having to go to work and get the kids to school and take care of the house and go to that friend's birthday party and remember this person's birthday, when there's so much life going on, it does seem to me this time definitely end up in the low side of our dominant type. Do you think that makes sense, just from your expertise, Lindsay? Can you see that as well, or you're nodding your head? I'm going to let you go.
I definitely see that in clients, sort of that going to that stress point, and definitely in myself as well. And I've noticed with having the social dominant as my stacking too, that like my worst case scenarios and the things that I start to worry about, or like, you know, like I'm more alert for, are more social dominant things. So like, oh, that person didn't respond to me right away. Like, are they mad at me? Did I do so? Nine and social.
Yeah, yes,
So
totally.
I would be curious, just that observation of, you know, is it the stress point? And then also, you know, I'll have to start to observing more, like, is it also about your dominant instinct? Because for me, it is.
Yes.
It's like the stress point, the worrying, as well as me stressing about the thing that I am overly focused on wanting and needing. So I think that was really interesting. And that's also been like, I think what's interesting about that as well is sometimes then, you know, for me, it's like, well, maybe I'm a 6, and I don't know that I'm a 6, right? Because I've got all these 6-ish qualities happening and occurring. And then when you look at it, I'm like, oh, but they only happen during the luteal phase, and then I'm more in, you know, my general, you know, and it's not to the extent that I think a 6 would live in every day, right? Because I don't live there every day. So I thought that was really interesting too. So that, you know, that understand, like, you know, questioning your type at times and things like that that might come out of what happens during.
I think yes to the instinctual stacking for sure. I think that's a huge point of interest that I want to look into more, because I think what you're saying feels absolutely true, especially you know, just looking at myself and for myself. But then also, you know, as a 1, when I am in my luteal phase, you know, I can you know, sometimes feel touches, like it's almost like I can smell my 4-ness just starting to peek out and come out. And you know, when we're talking about, you know, our move to our stress number or move to our health number, these are big moves. You know, I'm not fully becoming a 4 at all, but it's almost like the essence, there's a just a feeling of the 4 in this space for me, where I can kind of hold on to it if I want to, or I can be aware of it and allow it to, you know, make sense in my everyday. Breville Ida has just yeah, she's just, as a sexual dominant, my luteal worries tend to revolve around my sexual things, and my stress line to 4 is naturally more evident. Yeah, fantastic self-reflection there. That's awesome. Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think having this information is always just going to, as with any part of the Enneagram, just armor us to be more aware, to be more self-aware, and to have more compassion for self. But then understanding when our friends are in their luteal phase, actually, can we be aware of that? Can that, be a part of our friendship? How can we bring that part of us, all parts of us, into friendships and into relationships, which is what we're going to talk about in a moment as well. But let's talk about the different stances and how they show up, I think, in the luteal phase. There are no surprises, really. I think all the stances can struggle in this place. I think, and I do think this is where all of us tend to struggle a bit, which again isn't a death sentence, but it absolutely is. Just something to be aware of and something to inform us and inform our day to day. So I think aggressive stance can struggle because it's very, very difficult to be, a leader, to be showing up in our assertive way when our energy is dwindling and our baseline serotonin levels are lower and actually we're feeling really hungry and a bit crabby by 10:30. I think that's really hard. That's what I see with my clients, is what's reflected back to me. And I think that's something to be aware of, that maybe assertive stance cannot run as fast as they would like to during this phase. How can assertive stance people honor their body and honor the needs of potentially going a little bit slower, a light jog rather than running very fast through life? I think compliance stance can really struggle, which again we touched on it during our menstrual phase conversation, but it's very difficult to be everything to everyone during this time. And actually, yes, as our energy is dwindling and we're saying yes and saying yes and saying yes, actually, where can we say no? What does that look like? How can we do that well, and not from a place of exhaustion, but from a place of looking ahead and making a smart plan? And then I think withdrawing stance can struggle here too. And Lindsay, you tell me what feels right, but I think luteal phase is the perfect time to go so far in. It's almost difficult to come back out for things like work and friendships and relationships. But you please speak to withdrawing stance and your experience of the luteal phase.
No, I mean, I for me, that coming out of that and like reawakening and kind of making the movement. And so sometimes it's like, okay, now I'm moving, now I'm moving, now I'm moving. And then like almost that little bit of pushing yourselves, but then like with the inertia, like the minute that I stop, I stop. Yeah. And that can be really confusing to people around me, right? I will tend, I mentioned like I will tend to push through a little bit more when it's professional stuff, but I can be a little bit more withdrawn, slower to respond, slower to engage with people in my personal life, which I think is interesting as well. And there can be like that, like still like, oh, wait, I'm tired, but I'm going to keep moving because if I stop, I won't stop. And then once I stop, I stop. And I don't want to come back out of it. So it is that very much like very cozy there. I like it there.
Yeah. And let's consider that 2 weeks, which then is followed by the menstrual phase, more cozy time. That's a long time to be kind of inward. And when you stop, you do stop, as you said. And so actually, how can we build a relationship with this part of our cycle that still feels cozy and still honors what you need, but also helps you get the professional things done without feeling like we're pushing at an extreme level? I think is what we really want to key into there, with people in the withdrawing stance during this phase of their cycle, for sure. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Shall we talk about relationships? Know that the serotonin is lower. I've said it 15 times already this evening. And if you take nothing away from this conversation, please take away that hangriness exists, and being fed during the luteal phase is really important. And partners who are not in the luteal phase, that is the biggest thing you can do for us during this time, I think. But with the hangriness, with the kind of lower mood, with the kind of more authentic version of us that tends to come out during the luteal phase, which is often demonized and weaponized against us. Oh, are they PMSing? Oh, is she about to get her period? You know, these are harmful and hurtful things that are said. I think language around this part of the cycle, especially in our closest relationships, is hugely important. And then communication about what we need and what we find helpful and what we don't find helpful during this time, I think is massive. But I think as much open communication as possible around, you know, this the longest phase of the cycle, this 2 week sometimes feels a bit like a slog. Let's be really open about that communication with those closest to us, I think.
Yeah, I actually, it's interesting. I think I talked about this in the first one that we did. I will have partners get apps to track, especially if they're male partners, to sort of know where their partner is, right, in the cycle. Because there is more, I feel like it's like almost like you can't operate in your fixated state as much, right? Like your hormones are like, it's like for me, like I'm more irritated and frustrated, and versus like where I might hold it in, I might be like more likely to say something, right? Which is actually in the benefit sort of my type as well, that capacity to be more assertive, ask for what you need or want.
Yes.
Feels it and knows that I'm frustrated or upset. So I think that that piece is also really huge to sort of pay attention to, but also like having partners be more generous. Like I had a couple in my office where it was a 6-1 dynamic, right? And like, you know, the 6 is looking for that security and safety within the relationship and making sure that we're okay. And like when she gets into her luteal phase, she's more hypercritical, she snaps more. And like for him, this is why I wanted to share them, is like once he understood, he's like, if I know what to prepare for, right? Like a 6 wants, if I know what to prepare for and to anticipate and know that it doesn't affect like how you feel about me in relationship, because like he would take it as like, you know, like what am I doing? And it's like, we're not doing anything, right? Because there's still things that she has frustration, and yes, she needs to figure out different ways and better ways to communicate it. But if you can also understand that she's in that like end, it was mostly in the end part of her luteal phase, like this is what's happening, there was a capacity to be more generous with her and in response to her. And like, you know, like what do you need? What kind of person fix or figure out what he needs to do to sort of earn that closeness to her. So I think that that's just a huge thing that I found really helpful in relationships, right? And it can be confusing for male partners, right? Because we talked about, like you said, like the 24-hour clock, right? And it's like, why are you a different period? You know, different period, different person. It's a different period too. Different person, like, you know, 4 times throughout the month. And I think we do show up differently. And so helping our male counterparts, and just even women that are in relationship with other women, like helping them understand each other more in depth. Like we need to be talking about this more and having more of that generosity. And generosity again is that, you know, all of us at any given point in time are doing the best that we absolutely can. And in that process, sometimes we unintentionally hurt others. And when we think of it that way, we are so much softer when we have complaints, and we approach our partners in such different ways and are much more compassionate versus like, you know, like that critical or blamey stance I think a lot of us can go to, or withdrawing or stonewalling, depending. And you'll see the different stances have different tactics.
Yeah. We move into this conversation with talking about intimacy. you know, I think, you know, this is just a furthering of what you're saying there, Lindsay, I think, because again, it really is, you know, how can we be generous in this phase, and how can we communicate well? And I think sometimes when we're in it, it's very difficult to kind of stick our head above water and say, oh, this is what I need, because sometimes it feels like, you know, the waves, the hormonal waves are kind of, we've been thrown around. And so I think, you know, again, it is very type 1 of me, but as much as possible, how can we plan ahead to know that this phase is coming? Okay, what do we need? What food feels comforting this time? What food feels satiating in this time? What type of dates feel helpful in this time? What type of physical touch and intimacy feel helpful in this time? And I think it really does come back to this understanding of there is a different version of me present here right now during my luteal phase, and I'll be different again in a week's time, and then a week after that. And if we can hold compassion and understanding for that, wow, we're off to the races. We're not treating we're not treating ourselves like male bodies. We're treating ourselves like the body that we're in, like a female body. And I think that's almost revolutionary, you know, if we look back over history, and I think it's still so important to do today. And so absolutely, yes, as you mentioned, getting an app where the partner can track alongside. It is free, I believe. Your partner can track alongside you on their phone, so they have the information there. That is really going to revolutionize, I think, every part of your relationship. And you can also have your friends on there as well. There is a separate area for friends, which is also, I think, lovely and fun. But yeah, Lindsay, could you talk a little bit about kind of communication and expectations around intimacy during this phase?
You know, it's really going to depend on sort of the person and their type. But I mean, I do find that it usually takes a little bit more like work to move into intimacy or sexuality. People might want more sexuality or physical connection or fostering of emotional connection, which of course we always want all of these things. But I think in this phase in particular, like it's harder just to move right into intimacy, especially for, you know, women are really going to need, most women are emotional connection first, and then sexual connection. Though we do know our 7, 8s, and 4s, even the women usually are a little bit different. And so they can have usually move through, that assertive stance can move through a little bit more easily. But your withdrawal stance might want more rest, more time alone, that ability to have that, giving them that what they need, so then they can also show up sort of more within that intimacy place with you. So I think it's just having that conversation around, you know, what you need and want, and just really having that capacity to stay like, right now, I just really want more affectionate or sensual touch, right? And I don't know if I have the capacity to go to more playful, erotic, or intercourse touch, and sort of having that language around like what you have the capacity to give or not give. And I think it's just, it's important to do that. And, you know, even though I said, you know, your assertive stance can move, you know, the 7, 8, and 4 can move through more quickly, which actually the 4's not in the assertive stance, you know, but they have very high sex drive. So usually they can move through pretty quickly, but they need emotional connection first. Stance, or people that have the higher sex drive, this is the one time of the month they may not.
Mm-hmm.
Even though usually they can push through more easily than the other types can.
Yeah, so important. And I guess it's really knowing your partner in this place, and having this information is really going to set you up to have like the best version of your relationship possible. And so just being aware of that and holding space for that, I think is really, really important. Yeah, definitely. And I think also, again, you've mentioned this every time, but I think for those who maybe haven't heard it before, would you mind, again, just talking through the different kinds of touch there, Lindsay? Because you mentioned, I just think it's really powerful for those who maybe aren't aware of it, or haven't heard this before.
Yeah, I'm happy to walk through it again. I think we talked about it I think we talk about it every time. But again, there may be newer people on here that aren't familiar with what that is. But we have 5 different dimensions of touch, and this is actually created by Barry McCarthy, who is a sex therapist in the sex therapy world. He's actually probably in his 70s or 80s now. This is something that it's been kind of out there for a while. But you have affectionate touch, which is kind of like your hand holding or your pet kisses. You have your sensual touch, which is like making out, spooning, and massage can kind of be in here as well. And then you have playful touch, which is can be like if you're into any sort of kink or fetish, but also like one of my favorite examples, I believe I shared this one before as well, is just like I had a couple where it's like they're up in a cabin up north, right? And they're running around naked and they're kind of like being playful around the room and stuff like that. So it can also be things like that. I think playful touch, this is why I want to stop here a little bit, can be harder for people because they assume that it should be like a kink or a fetish or something different. And I was like, playful can look a multitude of ways. So it's your definition. Then you have intercourse touch. And as you look at the arousal levels, it goes from an arousal level of 1 to an arousal level of 10, right? And so it can be really hard in this particular phase to really just go from like 1 to 5. Or 1 to 10 arousal levels or 1 to 5 touch levels. Now that being said, most of us want to spend time all the way throughout, and most of us it's going to be easier to get there. But you will see, like you were saying, like in the follicular or the ovulation phase, people might be able to push more quickly into erotic and intercourse touch because the hormones are sort of supporting that. Again, this is going to depend on the couple and the people in your office, but I think just having language around touch and like what you have the capacity to give or not give. And there is a book where Barry McCarthy talks about this too, and I'll try to like link that as well for people.
Yeah, perfect. That's so helpful, Lindsay, because I think it's so, just having language is so empowering, and it just makes having conversations around that, just so much easier, and we can both be we can both be so much more informed, you and your partner, the person that you're in a relationship with. So thank you for running through that, because I think it's so important to understand that and have that information. So empowering. Incredible. I think we're almost towards the end of the final. Sad, but it's fantastic to have this information out there. So as Lindsay said, we have lives on the menstrual, follicular, ovulatory, and now luteal phase. So whatever phase you're in, please go back, watch, learn. As we mentioned, ask us questions, leave comments. We would send us DMs, however you'd like to. We'd love to support you, whatever that looks like. Excuse me.
Well, and I just want to say, like, thank you. This has been really, really great. I really enjoyed sort of bringing this to people. I think it's such an important topic, despite our technical difficulties. Apparently, must be my telephone that I need to figure out what's going on with it.
No, I think it's just having a moment.
And I know that I've been talking about that communication workshop that's coming, and I actually have finally set a date. This is very nine-ish of me, but I have been actually thinking about it since May. And here we go. Now it is actually going to happen on November 6th at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. It will be recorded. You can watch at any point in time that you want, and it will also be available afterwards. So just DM me any kind of questions you might have. I've mentioned a few times before, but I really wanted to be bringing things that are a little bit lower cost and more accessible for people, but things that I talk with clients all day long that I know would be helpful and useful for you. And I know that you as well, Evie, have some things going on as well, if you'd like to share.
Yeah, for sure. So I actually have 2 spaces open for one-to-one work in October, and then I have a few more spaces for November. Course dedicated to it. You can find all the information linked in my bio, but of course send a DM and let's chat about it. But Lindsay, thank you so much. This has been yeah, such an incredible journey to kind of talk through from, yeah, using both of our expertise. It's just been a joy to kind of create this with you. And yeah, let's see what the future brings. Thanks so much for being here this evening, this afternoon for you. And yes, maybe you'll see me and Lindsay back again together. Maybe something around the menopause, who knows? I'll speak to you soon, Lindsay. And thanks everyone for being here tonight. Bye.
Bye, Evie. Take care.